He thought he had all the answers, until one envelope rewrote everything. For over a decade, Jack Henderson, a single father in the quiet town of Willow Creek, raised his adopted twin boys Malcolm and Eli with unwavering love. Folks often whispered behind his back, seeing a white man raising two black sons was something this town wasn't used to. But Jack never flinched. From the first moment he cradled them in his arms, wrapped in worn blankets and crying for comfort. They were his sons. No questions asked. He taught them how to ride bikes, helped with homework, packed lunches and kissed skin knees. He never asked about their past, never had any documents, never needed any. Love was enough. Until one afternoon the phone rang. Eli had collapsed on the school playground. Jack's heart stopped. At the hospital, doctors stabilized his son, but they needed one thing Jack couldn't give: family medical history. Genetic details. Clues hidden in the past. With no records to offer, Jack found himself signing legal documents to open a sealed file he thought he'd never need. A birth certificate. It sat untouched at the edge of Eli's hospital bed. A few pieces of paper inside. But what it held would shake the ground beneath him and reveal a name he thought was gone forever. Jack stared at the sealed envelope like it might explode. It sat on the tray beside Eli's hospital bed, unassuming, clinical, and yet somehow heavier than stone. He hadn't opened it. He couldn't. "We only need it for Eli's treatment," said Dr. Monica Ellis, a calm, seasoned pediatrician with a steady voice and kind eyes. "We won't share it beyond that." Jack nodded, but his hand stayed still. Instead, he pushed the envelope toward her. "I trust you," he whispered, "but I'm not ready to see what's inside." That night, Jack slept, or tried to, curled in a plastic chair beside his son's bed, one hand resting gently over Eli's. Machines beeped. Tubes hummed. The hospital world moved on, but inside Jack's chest, something was unraveling. He thought of the day he brought the twins home, their tiny fists clenched, their futures unwritten. He'd promised them everything. But now, faced with uncertainty, he realized something profound. Being a father wasn't about what you knew. It was about what you'd risk for your child. Even your own peace of mind. 3 long days passed. Eli's condition stabilized, but answers were few. Blood work. Imaging. Consults. Still nothing conclusive. Jack's patience cracked. He stepped out into the hallway where Dr. Ellis stood, the envelope still sealed in her hands. "I think I need to see it now," he said, voice thin as paper. They sat in a quiet waiting room. Jack opened the envelope with trembling fingers. His breath caught. There it was, the name Serena Lane. He knew that name. He'd loved that name. Serena Lane had been his high school sweetheart. The girl who filled his locker with notes and his afternoons with laughter. The one who'd vanished after graduation, no warning, no explanation. And now, a decade later, her name was printed as the mother of the children he had raised. Jack blinked. His pulse pounded. She had never told him. And she was gone now. But if Serena was their mother, then whose children had he really adopted? And why had no one ever come looking for them? The hospital faded into the background as Jack sat alone in his truck, parked under a flickering street lamp. The birth certificate lay open on the dashboard, and the name Serena Lane stared back at him like a ghost. It didn't make sense. Serena had been white just like him. The boys, Malcolm and Eli, were black. And yet, there was no father listed. Just a blank space where half their identity should have been. Jack's mind raced. Had she used a donor? Was this planned? Had she meant to raise the boys herself? And if so, why had they ended up in foster care? By morning, sleep-deprived and determined, Jack began making phone calls, hospitals, county offices, old contacts from his past. Most doors closed in his face. Closed adoptions didn't leave much to find. But eventually, someone from a small county records department took pity and dug into a box of archived files. What she found shifted everything. Serena Lane had checked into a private maternity unit under a short-term surrogacy arrangement. An informal contract, no lawyers involved, just signatures on paper. She was to carry a child for a couple who couldn't conceive. But somewhere along the line things changed. The father had been a black donor. Whether by choice or mistake, Jack never learned. But when the intended parents saw the results of the 20-week ultrasound, their baby's skin tone, they walked away. Quietly, permanently, Serena was left to carry the pregnancy alone. She gave birth to twin boys. And days later she died, without ever holding them. No obituary. No funeral. No one stepped forward. And the boys, Malcolm and Eli, were placed into the system, nameless and unwanted. Until Jack, years later, walked into that adoption agency and saw two small boys clinging to each other in silence. He hadn't known the past. He hadn't needed to. But now the truth settled in his chest like fire. Serena hadn't abandoned them. She'd protected them until the very end. And the boys, his boys, deserved to know every piece of who they were. No more secrets. No more empty spaces. Back in the hospital, Jack sat quietly beside Eli's bed. The monitors hummed a steady rhythm, but inside him, everything had shifted. He clutched the folded birth certificate in one hand. No longer just paper but a lifeline, a key to truth he never imagined needing. Dr. Ellis returned that afternoon with test results. Her face was calm, but Jack could see the weight behind her eyes. "We found the cause," she said gently. "Eli has a rare genetic blood disorder, manageable, but only because we caught it early." Jack exhaled. The relief washed over him like warm water. "The information from the birth certificate," she added, "gave us what we needed. Without it, we may have missed the diagnosis entirely." Jack nodded, eyes damp. He had feared the envelope would break everything apart. But in the end, it saved his son's life. Still, one truth remained. Serena had died without him ever knowing she was pregnant. The twins were not his by blood, but somehow they were still his in every way that mattered. But questions he had never dared to ask now loomed. How would his sons feel knowing their birth mother was white like him, but they were not? Would they feel like outsiders? Would they wonder if they truly belonged? Jack's love had never wavered. But now he knew love alone wouldn't be enough. So that night, when the hospital hallways were quiet, he sat down with Dr. Ellis again. Not as a physician, but as someone who could help him navigate what came next. He told her everything: the surrogacy, the donor, Serena's death, his fears. Dr. Ellis listened without judgment. Then she said something that changed Jack forever. "Loving Black children," she said, "means preparing them for a world that might not. You can't protect them from everything, but you can show them how to stand tall in it." Jack nodded. He didn't know where to begin. "You begin," she said, "by listening and building their village." And that's exactly what he would do. From that moment forward, Jack understood. Fatherhood wasn't about what you could give, but what you were willing to learn. He didn't try to become something he wasn't. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, he started showing up differently. He joined a support group for transracial adoptive parents, mostly strangers at first, mothers and fathers raising children who didn't look like them, but loved them with everything they had. They talked openly about mistakes, fears, and the importance of cultural mirrors, people who could reflect the identity the children would grow into. Jack took notes, asked questions, and slowly built something he hadn't known was missing: a village. He introduced Malcolm and Eli to Black mentors, barbers, teachers, and neighbors. People who could answer the questions he couldn't. People who would affirm who the boys were, not just as his sons, but as young Black men in America. He filled their bookshelves with stories written by Black authors. He signed them up for heritage camps. He stopped brushing aside awkward questions about race and started having real conversations. Not lectures but listening. Not control but presence. And gradually the boys began to feel it too. The shift. Malcolm started asking about his hair, his skin, his roots, not with shame but with curiosity. Eli, now recovering and full of energy again, started drawing pictures of their family that included Serena, a woman he never met, but now knew was part of him. And Jack? He found that instead of being afraid to say the wrong thing, he leaned into the hard parts. He realized that being a good father wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to grow. One evening, while the boys were asleep, Jack sat at the kitchen table and stared at an old photo of Serena. Her laugh was frozen in time, wild and free. "You carried them," he whispered, voice soft. "And I'll carry them from here." A week after Eli's discharge, Jack knew the time had come. He had wrestled with it in his mind, how to tell the boys, when to say it, and whether they were ready. But the truth wasn't something to hide anymore. It was something to walk through together. That evening the living room was quiet. No cartoons. No homework spread across the floor. Just a single photograph placed gently on the coffee table. An old snapshot of two teenagers in love. One of them was unmistakably Jack. The other, a girl with a wide smile and deep, expressive eyes. Malcolm leaned in first. "That's you. But who's she?" Jack's voice was calm, but his heart was pounding. "Her name was Serena. She was your birth mother." Eli froze. "She's our mom." Jack nodded. "Yes. Serena carried you. Loved you. But she passed away right after you were born." Malcolm furrowed his brow. "But she looks like you. And we're not." Jack took a slow breath. "That's true. Your biological father was a black man. Serena didn't know him. He was part of a private surrogacy arrangement. She was carrying you for someone else. A couple who wanted children but couldn't have them." Eli looked down. "Then why didn't they take us?" Jack's voice grew firm. "Because when they saw your skin they walked away. But Serena didn't. She stayed. She delivered you. And she loved you until her very last breath." Silence hung heavy. Then Malcolm asked the question Jack feared most. "Why didn't you tell us before?" Jack met his eyes. "Because I didn't know. Not until the day you got sick and I opened that envelope. And because I was scared. Not of you. But of losing the only thing that ever mattered to me. Being your dad." He placed a hand on each of their backs. "You are my sons. Not because of a paper. Not because someone handed you to me. But because I choose you. Every single day." They didn't answer, not with words. But when Eli leaned in and laid his head on Jack's shoulder, and Malcolm reached across the table to take his hand, Jack understood. The truth didn't break them. It made them stronger. As the weeks passed and Eli's strength returned, Daniel felt a new urgency stirring inside him. The truth he had uncovered about the twins' origins had shaken him. But what stayed with him more deeply was the realization that loving them was no longer enough. He looked at his sons differently now, not with less love but with greater responsibility. Raising two black boys as a white man in America meant more than just providing a roof, meals, and bedtime hugs. It meant preparing them for a world that might not always be kind or fair. A world that would see them through a lens shaped by race before it ever saw their hearts. Daniel didn't want his boys to grow up feeling unprepared or unseen. So he went back to the one person who had guided him without judgment, Dr. Naomi Ellis. He told her everything. His fears, his confusion, and his deep desire to do right by the sons he had chosen. She listened, then offered something more than comfort. She offered a path forward. "You can't give them everything," she said gently, "but you can give them the tools to stand tall in who they are." With Naomi's help, Daniel began to build what she called cultural scaffolding. He joined a support group for transracial adoptive parents, where he listened more than he spoke. He met with local black educators, activists, and artists. He took the boys to community events, bookstores that celebrated black literature, museums that honored their history, and even found a black-owned barbershop where the boys would feel welcomed and proud. At home, the bookshelf slowly changed. Stories about Harriet Tubman and Langston Hughes sat beside bedtime fairy tales. Jazz and gospel music filled the kitchen on Saturday mornings. And Daniel, once hesitant, unsure, began showing up in a new way. Not as a perfect father, but as a present one. He wasn't trying to raise his sons to forget where they came from. He was helping them remember it with dignity and pride. And through that, he discovered something else. He wasn't just shaping their future. They were reshaping his. One quiet evening, with the TV off and the dinner dishes washed, Daniel knew it was time. He sat on the living room rug between Malcolm and Eli, a small photograph resting in his hand, faded from time but still clear. A teenage girl with fierce eyes and a laugh caught mid-smile. Her name was Serena. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice soft but steady. "Boys, there's someone I need to tell you about. Her name was Serena Lane. She was your birth mother, and she was someone I once loved very much." The room fell silent. The boys leaned in wide-eyed. "We were just kids," he continued. "High school sweethearts. She used to write poetry on the backs of her notebooks, and she made me believe the world was full of magic. But after we graduated, she moved away. I never knew why. I never heard from her again." Malcolm's voice was barely a whisper. "So she's really our mom?" Daniel nodded. "She carried you. She gave birth to you. And she loved you until her very last breath." Eli blinked. "Why didn't she keep us?" Daniel swallowed hard. "She didn't give you up. The people who were supposed to raise you walked away, because of your skin. Serena was left all alone. And then she passed away before she ever got to hold you." A long, heavy silence followed. Malcolm stared at the photo. "She looks like you. But we don't." Daniel placed a hand on each of their backs. "That's true. But listen to me closely, you are my sons. Not because of a name on a paper. Not because of biology. But because every single day I've chosen you. I still do. I always will." Tears welled in Eli's eyes. He leaned into Daniel's chest. Malcolm hesitated, then reached for his father's hand. In that moment, the air shifted, not with sorrow, but with something deeper, understanding. They had lost a mother they never knew. But sitting in front of them was a man who never stopped showing up. And that, Daniel knew, was the heart of family. In the weeks that followed their emotional conversation, something began to change, not just in Malcolm and Eli, but in Daniel too. He watched as his boys slowly stepped into the truth of who they were, not with confusion or fear, but with curiosity, and over time with pride. It didn't happen overnight. There were still quiet moments of doubt, still nights when one of them would ask questions that had no easy answers. But Daniel embraced those questions. He didn't shy away from the hard conversations, he leaned into them. He taught his sons that their story wasn't something to be whispered, it was something to be understood, honored, and owned. He helped them trace their roots, not just through books and history lessons, but through people and places. He took them to community gatherings where they met others who looked like them, who talked about legacy, resistance, and joy. He made sure they knew they belonged, not just in their family, but in a wider, deeper heritage that stretched back generations. And one afternoon, together, they picked the perfect spot on the wall above their bookshelf. There they hung a photo of Daniel and Serena from their teenage years, arms wrapped around each other, smiles full of hope and youth. Below it, a small wooden plaque read, "From the past came love. From love came you." It wasn't just decoration. It was a declaration. That image became a centerpiece of their home, not just a memory of what was lost, but a celebration of what endured. Daniel wanted his sons to see themselves not as abandoned, but as born from love. Not as left behind, but as carried forward by strength and choice. And every time Malcolm glanced at that frame before grabbing his backpack for school, every time Eli paused to touch the edge of the plaque with his small fingers, Daniel knew. This was the healing he had longed for. Not a return to what was, but a new beginning built on truth, dignity, and deep, unwavering love. On a warm spring afternoon, Daniel sat quietly in the living room, watching Malcolm and Eli build a model rocket together at the kitchen table. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the photo of Serena on the wall, the same photo that had once shattered his world, but now grounded it. He hadn't given them life. He hadn't passed along their eyes, their curls, or their skin. But he had chosen them, fought for them. And in every hard moment, when silence seemed easier than truth, he had spoken honestly and loved louder. When people asked how he managed to raise two boys with such strength and grace, Daniel would simply say, "Real love doesn't hide. It listens. It learns. It tells the truth even when it's hard." Because love, he realized, wasn't just what you felt. It was what you chose. Every single day. The hardest truths often carry the greatest healing. Real love isn't about avoiding pain, it's about standing in it together and turning it into something meaningful. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever faced a truth that changed everything and made you stronger? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear. Love isn't found in perfection. It's found in the courage to show up, tell the truth, and never stop choosing each other.